Penso che un sogno così non ritorni mai più. Mi dipingevo le mani e la faccia di blu. Poi d'improvviso venivo dal vento rapito e incominciavo a volare nel cielo infinito.
Hello everyone, that music is Nel Blu dipinto di blu, also known as Volare by Domenico Modugno from 1958. And this is Sam of Historiansplaining. A historian tells you why everything you know is wrong. So I just wanted to give a brief update for listeners to the podcast. As some of you know, I just recently posted on Patreon another lecture on Italy, specifically on state-building struggles and the entry into World War I. If you listen, you'll find that this is very important history if you want to understand the roots of fascism, specifically in the country where it originated. And so patrons may have already listened to that on Patreon, and for non-patrons, I'll play an excerpt just a little later in a few minutes after this update. And I am also still working on several ongoing projects that I've mentioned before, both videos and lectures. There have been some delays the past few months due to some disruptions to the work that I was working on in April and May, but I expect now to be able to resume more or less the normal pace of work and to make some progress on those. And also tentatively, I expect to go on the Katie Halper show again soon, within the next few weeks or so. And one of the topics I expect to discuss on Katie Halper's show is the history of the papacy, which of course has come into our minds and conversation recently with the very historic development of the first ever American Pope. And I expect to post a lecture on it soon too, hopefully by the end of June. That's my goal. And some reminders to different listeners, to longtime listeners and fans, please sign up at any level on Patreon in order to support and keep these lectures coming, and in order to hear patron-only lectures, such as the one that I've mentioned that I just posted on Italy, and others including on the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Dead Sea Scrolls. To newer listeners, if you're just becoming familiar, you were just exposed to the podcast, you might want to look at the website, historiansplaining.com, which I'll link to, which was created by my brother, a professional web project manager, and it has different features such as short samples of episodes to help choose what you might be interested in listening to, and different ways to sort through different episodes by content, which can be really useful for looking through such massive material that's been posted over the last several years. And that includes, for instance, a world map where the different episodes are shown and linked to geographically, and timelines which arrange these subjects chronologically, and suggestions that are arranged by related themes. So all of this can help you to sort of navigate all this different material that I've been able to talk about. And it can also be useful possibly to send to friends to help them see if they're interested, and it links out to different platforms like SoundCloud, Podbean, Apple, etc. So it might be helpful to those who use different platforms. And lastly, I'll mention, since Father's Day is coming up, I want to wish a happy Father's Day firstly to my dad, Carl Biagetti, my biggest, most loyal supporter, and also wish a happy Father's Day to any and all fathers who might be listening as well. And now I will just play an excerpt of a few minutes from my last lecture on Italy between the time of unification and the First World War. Large plantations and the conversion to efficient production for the market, including of grapes and silk, which could be processed in domestic industries. But even after all of this, in the 1890s, domestic industry still lagged far behind even France, let alone Britain or Germany, which were leaps and bounds ahead, fueled largely by coal and other fossil fuels. And Italy, by about 1895, seemed almost like a relic of a different century, and it was hard to see how they could possibly close this yawning gap with the greater powers. But nonetheless, a boom did begin, and real growth started in the late 1890s. There was some benefit, as we said, from the import tariffs for particular sectors. There was also reform in the banking system, which had been, the cause of these repeated political scandals. Finally, reforms were brought in to encourage domestic and foreign investment. And finally, real change became conceivable with the advent of electricity. So state and private investors began to build some commercial power plants in the 1880s, very soon after they were first invented. The first one in Italy opened in Milan in 1883, just 1 year after the first power plants were launched in London and New York. But this was a very small coal-powered plant that was sited to electrify a small area of Milan, and mainly to light the La Scala Opera House. Right, so you can see where the priorities are here, right? Get to the opera house first. And it was very expensive. The coal to fuel this power plant had to be imported. But Italy did have, as we said, water power along the slopes of the Alps, which in theory could be tapped to power electrical generators. And as early as the 1880s, some industrial manufacturers did begin tinkering and setting up small water-driven electrical generators to power workshops. The problem then was with transmission. This became the main limiting factor. There was no way to move that electrical power long distances in order to electrify cities or large industrial plants. But in the early 1890s, high-voltage power lines were invented, and this raised a whole new possibility. The idea of building large power plants on the Alpine rivers and then transmitting the electricity from these plants through high-voltage lines down to the major cities and the flat plains of the Po Valley. In 1895, the state contracted with the Edison Company to build the first hydroelectric power plant in continental Europe, and it was sited at the village of Paderno D'Adda on the Adda River, just northeast of Milan. It came online in 1898, and 20-mile-long power lines carried the 9,500 kilowatts of power all the way into Milan. And soon similar power plants were built to electrify Turin and then other cities across the north. So suddenly, cities that had been, in a way, stuck in the 18th century suddenly leapfrogged ahead into the 20th century and beyond their rivals in Northern Europe, since they had access to a cheap, clean, and dependable source of electrical power. Foreign investment poured in, and an industrial triangle quickly sprang up in the area between Milan, Turin, and Genoa, the last of which gave this new industrial zone access to the sea. And the new booming industries could draw upon abundant cheap manual labor, as some of this stream of impoverished peasants who were emigrating from the south and the northeast could start to migrate now into these industrial areas of the northwest and to work in these industries. They also could draw upon abundant, highly trained Italian engineers and designers who were often underemployed. And there was dramatic growth in heavy industries, including steel, shipbuilding, and chemicals. But also new industries arose, often focused on producing high-value luxury consumer goods, which could reach wealthy consumer markets willing to bear the extra cost of the high tariffs. A major example of this was automobiles. So by about 1895, some small firms in the Northwest, which mainly had been making bicycles, started producing motorized wagons or carriages with internal combustion engines, usually custom-made for wealthy clients, especially for racing. Now, after this industrial boom and this influx of new labor into the Northwest, the possibility arose of mass production of high-quality motor cars for an international market. In 1899, a young ex-soldier in Turin founded the Turin Italian Automobile Manufactory, or in Italian, Fabbrica Italiana Automobili Torino, or for short, Fiat. And after 1900, this firm became one of the premier auto firms in the world as one of the few to combine high quality with consistency in mass production. And it was followed in 1910 by Alfa Romeo. So these sorts of new industries fueled a decade-long boom from about 1897 through 1907. And this has been called the first Italian economic miracle. So through these years, there was an annual economic growth of about 7% a year. By 1911, Italy became majority urban for the first time, if one includes smaller cities like Bologna or Ancona. And there was a fast-growing urban proletariat and a growing urban bourgeoisie, which came to be known in Europe as highly literate, cultured, and well-traveled. This new economy was also buoyed by the protectionist policies championed by the longtime repeat Prime Minister Giovanni Giolitti.